Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Ed Delia. I'm the second generation president of Delia Associates. We are the growth advisory and activation firm focused exclusively on family-owned B2B companies. And today I'm joined by Dr. Lauri Union, adjunct lecturer at Babson College, creator of the Healthy Family, Healthy Business Method, and former director of the Bertarelli Institute for Family Entrepreneurship. Lauri's career spans academia, entrepreneurship, family business leadership, and organizational transformation. At just 27 years old, she became president and CEO of her own family business, Union Corrugating Company, leading its turnaround and eventual growth into an industry leader. Since then, she's led transformations across multiple organizations, founded one of the world's premier institutes dedicated to family entrepreneurship, and developed groundbreaking research exploring how entrepreneurial families create value together across generations. Today, we'll talk about family entrepreneurship, leadership, succession, organizational transformation, and what she's learned from both the classroom and the boardroom. Lauri, welcome to Growing Up B2B.
Thank you so much, Ed. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Same here. I've been looking forward to this since we talked way back when. So for listeners who may not be totally familiar with your work, can you tell us, in your own words, what's family entrepreneurship means and why it's different from simply talking about family business?
Yes, thank you, one of my favorite questions. So thank you for asking it. And this is the way I think about it. So, 81% of all businesses in the world are family firms. So family business is obviously a very important topic. And there's a lot of research, consultants, books written about family business. But the challenge is that for the most part, when you really think about it, it's a topic about a business, right? So the question is, how can we keep that business in a family for multiple generations? This is our metric of success. How many generations has the family owned the business? How can we get the next generation into the business? How can we create effective governance for the business? And family entrepreneurship, and I would say also family business, this idea of keeping the business in the family from generation to generation, that's a lot of kind of preservation, right? How do we preserve what we have? And of course, we want to preserve what we have. I'm not saying these are bad things, but family entrepreneurship, it's really a broader topic, I would say. So if you can think of family businesses kind of fitting underneath family entrepreneurship. Family entrepreneurship is a topic about the family. It's about how the family can use, in a broad way, their assets, right? So families have assets that are not just wealth or a business, but are also relationships, values, and maybe most important, their knowledge of how to, an industry or how to run a business or things like that, things that you can't learn in school, right? Like these are like this like knowledge that, is priceless, but where do you get it? You get it from your family. But anyway, so how do families use all this kind of collective broader set of assets to create value together across generations and time? And that can be, right, kind of an existing business and kind of keeping it as it currently is. And sometimes that makes perfect sense. But, the world is changing so quickly. Like, I mean, the average company that was on the Fortune 500 was there for 60 some odd years, maybe 50 years ago. Now it's 15. The average small business lasts maybe 8 years. So this idea of it's really important that the business continue, to me, that doesn't resonate. It's more about how do we innovate? How do we take everything the family has and translate that into a future that is about creating value, but also is purposeful and meaningful to family members in the next generation.
That's such a healthy way to look at it and approach it, because I think that's probably where some of those generational transitions get stuck, because they're trying to operate from the past and they're not operating more with in the present and with the future in mind. And I think that's kind of, at least one of my takeaways from what you just said, is that, honor the past, but don't live there.
Right. Yes. And I think those generational shifts, right, they get stuck because there's too much of trying to fit the younger generation into the older generation's shoes. And sometimes those shoes just don't fit. And just because the older generation did it a certain way, it's not that it's it's not really whether it's good or bad or something is better or worse. It's not really that. It's just that people do their best work when it centers around what they're good at,
Mm,
what interests them. And when that's connected, I mean, not just, I mean, it's great. And also when it's connected to some kind of value creation.
mm,
And it's great when it's, some kind of value creation that is meaningful for them, for their family.
absolutely, absolutely. So coming back around to your own journey at a young age, at just 27 years old,
Yeah.
you became president CEO of your own family business during what I understood was a very challenging period. So take us back there, Lauri. Talk about that experience and what did some of the lessons you learned and the things you were going through teach and impart on you that perhaps couldn't quite be reconstructed in the classroom setting?
Yeah. So maybe I should just give a little history of the business first, just like kind of set the table for the
Sure,
context, because that's
absolutely.
kind of interesting too. So, okay. So first of all, my family business was started by my father's father, my grandfather. And um, my father and his father had a very dysfunctional relationship. We could spend a whole podcast talking actually honestly about that. But it was so dysfunctional that it either caused or contributed to my father eventually having such severe mental health problems that he could not function.
Mm,
Um, so that's sort of kind of one piece of it. The business itself, it still exists today. We had a successful private equity sale, which was fabulous, but it still exists today. And that business, when I took it over, was a manufacturer of corrugated steel roofing and siding. And I
mm,
don't know if people know, like it's a very at the time a very kind of agricultural sort of low end building product. Put it on a shed,
mm-hmm,
take off one rusty piece, put another rusty, this kind of thing.
mm-hmm,
Anyhow, so that's sort of what the business was about. It was a small company, about 9 million in revenue, and six manufacturing plants in very small towns throughout the Southeast. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, by the way, so
okay.
that's where the headquarters was. And so that's kind of the maybe sort of a little bit of the business table. And then for me personally, so I had left North Carolina for college. And throughout my time growing up, my parents almost never discussed this business with me.
Mm,
But I had left. I went to Princeton, and then I worked for Bain and Company, which is a major consulting firm. And then I went to Harvard Business School, and I had an offer from Boston Consulting Group, another major consulting firm. I met my husband. We were living together in Boston. So I had my whole life, you know,
yeah.
pretty much planned out. Um, and I was going to work with, CEOs of major companies and that was my plan. Um, that's when my mother reached out to me to say, hey, you know, since you're in Harvard Business School and all, I think I need to tell you what's going on with our family business.
Mm,
And, what had happened is that, so first of all, I should backtrack a little bit. Like, I now understand why my parents never talked to me about the business. They always said that they never talked to me about it because they thought I had better things to do in life.
mm,
And I get that. I think that was, genuinely part of it. And I hope it's okay. This is okay word, but it was just like a really crappy business, frankly. Like really, I mean, it was a small business, uncompetitive, declining market, you know, no power with suppliers. Just, I mean, it was just dirty, smelly, just like it was just like really, really crappy business. So that I mean that is was part of it, right? Not that crappy businesses can't be great and make money, but that was their perception. But I think the bigger thing was, and like I said, it took me a long time to see this, was that with my and the relationship between my father and his father, so they had had this very dysfunctional relationship. My grandfather actually tried to sell the business kind of out from under my father without telling him. And my father
wow.
found out. My mother and
Mm,
father scrambled to buy the business for my grandfather. My father and grandfather never spoke again for the rest of my
oh
grandfather's
my.
life. Um, and I think, they didn't want that for their family. So I
Sure.
think that's part of why they never involved me. But bizarrely enough, I was not aware of what had been happening, which was that I mean, I knew this part, of course. My father had separated himself from the family, and because he was so mentally, dysfunctional and just, really, he just wanted to be alone. So he had actually moved a couple hours away from the family, and we really never saw him. But he also was not involved in the business, so he appointed an employee to run the company.
Okay, I see.
Okay, so my mother, meanwhile, was she had done a lot of civic leadership. So she had a lot of leadership experience, just not exactly in business, but she was a little bit involved in the business, but not doing a lot. Um, but she began to notice, and even she and my father were not talking much at that time, but she began to notice the business was like significantly declining, right?
Mm,
The revenue was down 25% and it was consistently losing money. She and my father had a personal guarantee. Um, and this is how she tells it. She, at one point just said, well, like someone's got to do something. So I guess it's got to be me because obviously my husband can't do it. So like,
mm,
I guess I'm,
mm.
going to the office every day now. So she started to do that. She realized that that manager that my father had promoted was stealing the company blind, but he had done so much damage, just tremendous damage.
Oh, wow.
The company was like barely alive. And, so this is when she reached out to me because she realized she had done everything that she could. And, but, she wasn't going to be able to save the company. So I,
So
like
you were
that,
a lifeline, basically. She needed a
yes.
lifeline, and you were that.
Yes, exactly. But of course, I had a whole nother life planned, right? Like
Yeah.
this was like, not part of, this was not part of the plan. But my husband also had a family business, and which he had also been to Harvard Business School,
Mhm,
with me, and was doing, had another leadership role. But his family did have a family business, and he said, two things. One is like if you don't do something, you're going to regret it because the business is going to go under.
mhm,
Among other things, I had realized, well, I might be supporting my parents for the rest of their lives. So that's,
mhm.
was a consideration. And the other thing he said, which has really stuck with me, and I often tell this to my students, is the thing is, if you have a business, you can do something with it. Like, having a business, like most people don't have a business. Um, so we agreed that I would commute from Boston for a year just to get the company ready for sale, and I took a leave of absence from Boston Consulting Group because I really wanted to return to that job. And,
Mhm.
there was no way I was giving that up. So,
And
but
the business was in Fayetteville as well?
in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So I was
Okay.
commuting from Boston to Fayetteville,
Okay.
all these six manufacturing plants, like Vicksburg, Mississippi, Tifton, Georgia, you know,
Mhm.
Orange, Virginia, small towns, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyhow, but so, but something funny happened. Like when I got there and got involved with the business, I fell in love with running it. I don't know how to explain it any other way. I really fell in love with running that business. And that's how, one year turned into 14 and but we had a great run. We grew the business 12 times over to over 110 million in revenue, significant
Wow.
profitability relative to the industry. And it was just, I mean, for me, my mother, it was just I mean, the business was successful. We both loved our work. We felt so motivated and just, gratified by the work that we were doing. And I got to know my mother in ways that I never would have. Our relationship just became, something so special because of that work together. So it was just, it was an unexpected gift.
That's awesome. What an amazing story. Now, did your mother stay active for a while once you came in and stepped in? Or did she
Yeah.
stay active as well? So you
Whole
worked
time.
together? Okay, the whole
Yeah.
time. Okay.
So this
Okay,
is
that's great.
because she jokes, and I think she's true. Like this is something that only a mother would do. She was president of the company, and when we agreed that I would join, she became vice president, and I became president. So my mother was technically reporting to me.
Okay. Okay.
But that's, I
Interesting.
mean, honestly, that is just I think it's part of the reason why we were so successful together, because it was never about her ego. It was
Hmm.
about how do we do the right thing?
That's awesome. So 27 years old, you're stepping into this business, one that you really hadn't had much exposure to. I mean, you knew it existed, but you never really,
Yeah.
the hands-on exposure to it or what they did there. You've probably had some idea. What were some of the initial moves you made upon arrival and starting to assess the landscape and saying, "Oh gosh, we're in decline. We need to stop the bleeding. We need to turn this around."
Yeah. So, if one thing I should say is that there are two Harvard Business School case studies written about my turnaround. The company's called Union Corrugating Company. So that explains in detail,
Okay.
what I did. But so a few things. First of all, before I accepted the role in the company, I was still in business school. So I worked with a professor and two classmates, and we did what was called a field study, right? So we analyzed the business, the industry, et cetera. Of course, the things we concluded, from a distance, in many cases were like not right at all, once I
Okay.
got there, but it gave me a good grounding. And
Mhm.
that's actually, in my class that I teach at Babson. It's called Entrepreneurial Families. So one of the things my students do, they have to do a field study of their own business, right? Because
Hmm.
a lot of times people have never had that experience of, it's my responsibility to analyze this business, the market, the industry, make recommendations, this kind of thing. So it helped me, it helped set me up in some ways. But of course, when I got there, I mean, it turns out that like at Harvard Business School, they don't teach you how to do accounts receivable. I mean, I had absolutely no idea. Accounts payable, no idea. I mean, this is not, so I had to learn, not just I mean, I never ran a business before, so it's
Mhm.
like, I mean, it's not like I didn't know that industry. Like I never ran a business before. So I had to learn both the industry and the specifics of that company and all of the just like normal functions that, any small business has. What I did in my first, you know, 2, 3 months in particular, although I continued it ongoing, and it's one of the things that I have carried forward in all parts of my career because I've realized how important it is. I met with employees at all levels of the business, truck driver, we said people, catching metal off the end of the machine. And honestly, I should say most of the employees in this business had only a high school degree, right? So, I was
What was the total population or of all the various facilities? Like how many people were employed?
50, 75.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, even though they were, like these locations each of them didn't have that many employees.
Okay, I see. Okay.
So I could meet with, a
Okay.
significant percentage, which that was reasonable. Um, and, you know, of course, it was an interesting dynamic, right? Because, they knew that I had an Ivy League academic background. Um, and that could have been, I think, um, an obstacle. It could have been, I think, right? But I wasn't doing this intentionally. I just was, going to the accounts receivable clerk to say, can you explain to me how you do your job? Because I don't know. And
Hmm.
what's hard about your job? Is there some way that I can help? What would make it easier? And this was I was having these kinds of conversations.
Hmm.
Um, and through that, I, in retrospect, I realized it's kind of like the activity of the business is like a pie, and everyone, because of their function, knows their slice super well, right?
Yeah.
Person in accounts receivable, the truck driver, they know their slice really well, what's going on in their slice, what's not working in their slice, the opportunities in their slice. Like they really know that. But of course, they don't see the whole business because would not be
Hmm.
realistic. So, but because I had these conversations, number one, I definitely built um, the trust and respect of the employees. Right? So it was much easier to build trust and respect by respecting their knowledge and trying to help them than by talking about the Harvard Business School case study that I did that might be relevant to their work or what, or whatever.
Mhm.
Or by trying to tell them what to do or have a big reorganization, that didn't, that was much more effective. Um, so, but anyway, after I had those, many meetings, I kind of had a view of the whole pie, right? Because I went deep into every little slice. Um,
Mhm.
and, so then I was able to see what were the opportunities to quickly turn the business around and, how could I tap into the capacity of of those employees? Um, and I think one of the things that, I mean, I guess I don't think I really thought about it one way or the other before, but that I like really noticed pretty quickly was, wow, like I have, um, this academic background. These people who maybe only had a high school degree, they just didn't have the same educational opportunities as me. But they're
Mhm.
super smart, dedicated, capable. They really care, and they have good ideas. So I just sort of never, I never been in a situation where I really, needed to kind of see that. Um, but it was part of the reason why I loved working in the company so much was because, I loved tapping into people's knowledge and helping them to be able to have more of an impact.
So when you got there, so would you say then that the overall team was still, even though the business was struggling, was still committed to the organization? Like did you walk into a fairly high level of commitment, or was there kind of in bits and pieces? Some were, some were not. Like talk
Yeah.
about the climate from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. I would describe the climate as a group of people who felt like they were losers on a losing team.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
The morale was terrible.
Wow.
Um, they cared. And frankly, these people needed their job, like,
Yeah.
um, and so, there was that part too, but, they had seen the things that had gone on. They had actually been told that they needed to lie to customers or to, cheat or, do things that didn't, but not by my mother, of course, I'm talking about by the other person. Um,
Hmm.
they were told they needed to do things that violated their morals, that they didn't feel good about. So
Mm.
that was, part of it. And customers were upset all the time. Like that's never fun,
Yeah,
and
that's not good.
not meeting commitments, seeing the company decline. So that's where people were. And one of the things that I realized was that I needed to, um, you know, create a sense of like what can we do, a sense of hope and agency, because it was hard to do anything because as it turned out, and this didn't just start, even when my father took over, but would have been opportunities to, to address this along the way, which didn't happen. But, there were pieces of equipment that were 50 years old that were completely unable to produce, quality product that could, really meet a customer's needs. The trucks were constantly breaking down, so we couldn't meet a delivery schedule. The inventory was old, so a lot of times, steel gets, corroded. A lot of times the inventory
Mm.
that we were shipping it out was already, rusted or whatever. So, like it was, we were really limited in terms of we didn't have financial resources. It wasn't like we could just like replace all those machines. We were losing money.
Mhm.
So like what are the things, there was not a lot that we could like immediately do. But what I realized is that um the one thing that we could do was just effectively do our best every day with what was in our control. Um, and I invited the former number two person in the company that had left, before, even like right when my father started, he left, I guess, but he'd been with my grandfather since the beginning.
Mhm.
I invited him to we prepped before, of course, but I invited him to a company meeting. I call it like basically all the employees as much as possible together. And he told a story about, a time when he had been really proud of the company and what the company did and how it took care of customers and employees. And then I asked other kind of, old timers to share the same. When were you proud of this company? And we had some discussion about it. And then we agreed that we were going to never lie to a customer again. We were going to treat our fellow employees and suppliers with respect. And we were going to do our best to meet our commitments or to be upfront if we couldn't. And we were going to go home every day, look ourselves in the mirror and be proud of what we did. And it was freeing, right? Because,
Mm.
it was something, this is what we could control. And I could feel the room shift, right? When, because I think they felt that they could be, again, proud of their work.
Wow. Wow. So that must be, looking back, quite a transformative moment in and of itself for you as you look at that journey.
Yes.
Do you see that now you referenced an individual that was charged with running the company. Was that person removed at that point in time, or was that person still involved?
No. So when my mother stepped in and, when she saw the problems,
Hmm.
um, she realized that he had been stealing. Actually, an employee came to her and said,
Mm.
like, you need to know what's been happening. So she had fired him maybe probably 2 years before I got involved.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, it was not, he probably stole 700,000, $1 million,
Oh
like a
my
lot.
gosh.
Like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not talking about like a small amount of money.
Yeah.
Um, but we decided that, not to try to prosecute him or whatever, because it would just been a huge distraction. And, I mean,
Yeah.
what was it going to lead to anyway? So we just focused on moving forward.
So from that point forward, like, how long did it take you to start to turn things around, to kind of, you said the business was losing money or around the time you showed up. So how long did it take for you to start to eke out a small net profit and start to take the business to a profit position?
Yeah. So it turned out there was one thing that could really start the business on the right path. There were a number of there were a number of things that I was working on simultaneously, but one that was going to make a clear difference. The quick answer to your question is that we increased our sales by 20% in the first year, and we were profitable by
Wow.
the end of the first year.
Wow.
But what I realized is that um, the raw materials, mostly steel, accounted for about 95% of our product cost.
Oh.
And we didn't have like very high gross margins. So it was a significant percent of the overall, structure of the business, just steel pricing. So I wanted to know if we had good steel pricing. And I did um, an analysis where I just like talked to different people who sold, like retailers, whoever, like similar, not necessarily our customers, but people who are selling the product, similar products from our competitors. And they just made some assumptions like, what's a typical retail margin? What's a typical, um, margin from a manufacturer or wholesale, whatever, to just estimate what I thought the price per pound of the steel would be. And I thought we were paying about 10% too much. And I wasn't like, I thought, okay, I wonder why. So, I talked a lot with the person who was the purchasing manager. He was like the number two guy in the company. He, I didn't seem to have as much knowledge about, didn't seem to have anywhere near as much knowledge about purchasing as I would have expected based on his role, put it that way. And he really didn't want me to talk with our vendors, like really didn't want me to talk with the vendors. And I thought that was like a little strange. So I, of course, met with the vendors without him anyway, obviously. And I presented my analysis, and guess what happened? We got a price 10% lower. That was about 4 or 5 months in. And,
Wow.
and then obviously, what could be the reasons why that scenario happened? Either this person's very incompetent or they're stealing. Those are the reasons. I didn't know which, but I knew I had a problem.
Interesting. And without going too deep into my own journey, similar experience where um, about 2 weeks after making the decision to come into this business, my dad handed me first time I ever, I was 22 years old looking at a P&L statement for the first time. So, first two questions were, Dad, why is this bottom number in the first column in parentheses? He goes, we lost money last month. Okay. So now why is this bigger number next to it also in parentheses? It's like, we've been losing money all year. I'm like, it's funny. That didn't come up when we had that talk about coming in.
Yeah, right.
And in some cases, Lauri, forget about 10%. How about 10x?
Yeah.
There was, in one case, something that we were buying at $3,500 that, I went and I looked into it myself. I'm like, gosh, that sounds high. That we then started buying for $350.
Wow.
And, when the secondary supplier told me their pricing, I'm like, no, that can't be right. Is it the same, and I described, I'm like, it's the same output, right? The same goods, the same quality, the same. He's like, yes.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, sold. And
Yeah.
it wasn't through any wrongdoing. What it was through was what I noticed the company had established relationships with certain suppliers and for many, many years. And every year upon year, a little bit of a price increase. When you compound that 10 or more years, suddenly something that costs 350 is at 3,500,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't through any, I think, any nefarious doings. It was really just because, people were not being attentive and just stuck in the way of doing
Yeah.
and not open to new ways of doing.
Yeah.
So,
And you know what? I think, one interpretation of that is that, people were just lazy or whatever, but, and maybe that would be some of it, perhaps, but, another lens on that is a challenge that, a lot of family businesses face, which is that they really value relationships and
mhm.
they don't want to push back sometimes on customers, employees, suppliers, because they value those relationships. But family businesses are vulnerable, right? To, having suppliers that charge too much, to having employees that aren't doing
Yeah,
their work properly, to having customers that don't pay their bills. And that can put pressure on the business.
yeah, yeah, 100%. So, getting around to some of your more recent work, your research has led to the development of what you call now the healthy family, healthy business model.
Yeah.
Without getting too deep into the framework itself, talk about that a little bit and what insight that uncovered that surprised you or energized you in terms of what your findings led to.
Yeah. So first, a little bit of background about why I got interested in this. So I mentioned before that my husband also had a family business. So and I described how things worked out for my mother and I, which was was fabulous. Um, my husband and his family had pretty much the exact opposite experience in working together, which is years of estrangement, emotional pain,
Mm,
almost losing their business. And this is they were very close family. I mean, they've
mm,
reconciled now, so it's not that. But when I met him, they were such a close and caring family, and we lived all like within a mile of each other. So to be not speaking for 15 years,
my
it
goodness.
was like a black cloud
Yeah.
over us every day. And this is a kernel, question that I took into my initial work at Babson, which is, why did it work out for my family and not for my husband's family? Because they're both loving families with super smart and I mean, even my husband said maybe even more, super smart and talented people who care. Um, so what's the difference? And when I first joined Babson, I'm the founding executive director of what you mentioned before, the Bertarelli
Mm,
Institute for Family Entrepreneurship. I wasn't a family business expert. I had just worked in a family business when I first started there. But I almost immediately started getting calls from alumni saying, hey, I've got a problem with my dad, my brother, my sister, my mom, my whole family. And can you help me? Which I actually thought was kind of funny because I just thought like, who calls their college to ask for help with a family problem? But this is part of the, kind of magic of Babson, I guess. It's, obvious people don't know Babson. It's, leading school for business and entrepreneurship. But anyway, so, and I noticed that. And as I began to engage more with students and families, what I consistently heard is the advice that we have been given or what we've learned or read about, which is, put in place good governance or make a succession plan, have those difficult family conversations. All that is not working for us. Like, it's not that it's bad advice. Like, it's not the governance. I mean, obviously having good processes for making decisions, whether it's formal governance or, not every business needs a formal governance structure, but, how do we make these decisions? Obviously, people need that. Businesses need that. There's no question about that. Obviously, people need to have difficult conversations or hard conversations. And obviously, I mean, it's not that those things are not true. It's just that the families couldn't get there. They couldn't use it. They knew they needed to do both of those things, but it wasn't happening, or they had tried to put something in place and it made things even worse. So I started off thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to go find what are the resources that can help people with this problem. And I realized they didn't exist. And that's where I thought, okay, I'm going to do some exploration to understand this better. So I actually got a certificate in family therapy, which was helpful because then I understood the family dynamic much better. But I also really understood that, like, family, you get a problem where the family business side is a business topic, but the family is involved, and family therapy is like a family topic, but the business is not involved. So neither one of those are really going to be enough to, and also, I don't know how many people, I mean, some people don't want to go to family therapy, put it that way. But that's so it's not necessarily like the go-to solution. That's where I decided to get my doctorate at Johns Hopkins in neuroscience of learning, because I wanted to understand better, kind of what are some of the underlying dynamics that are making it hard for people to be able to do these things that they know they need to do. And if we could understand that, how would they learn how to do it, right? It's not like just talking about this stuff is not helpful. Like, people need to take action and do things to achieve the things they want. So that's where I wanted this, neuroscience of learning in particular. And what I realized through that work, my dissertation and other work that I did and things that I've studied, is that, there's a reason why it's a universal reason, actually. There's a universal reason why it's hard for families to take advantage of this good advice, hard for families to work effectively together. That universal reason, it actually has to do with the way our brains function. And so it's really kind of a neuroscience problem, which sounds kind of scary, but it's not, because what my work is really translating this into a set of kind of 3 rules that people can use that help them to be able to achieve the things they want to achieve, which what I've heard, and so what my model is, the healthy family, healthy business model is designed to do, is to increase your chances of having success in business, healthy family relationships, and personal satisfaction in work and life, kind of all at the same time. That's what it's meant to do. I worked with a very renowned Harvard Business School professor, Len Schlesinger, to translate my dissertation into this action model, right? So, which is just to say that, this is something that has been reviewed, and attributed to by, a leading thinker. And so I'm super excited about it, right? Because I'm just now writing a book about it, creating a platform. My goal is really to be able to help families with businesses, large or small, wherever they are in the world, to be able to have this kind of, it's like putting the foundation of the house, right? Because you're trying to do the governance and all these other stuff without a good foundation. It's like trying to build a house without a solid foundation. Sometimes it might work, but sometimes it might kind of fall apart. So this is really to give people the foundation that that they need. And I think in particular, my sense from kind of a lot of the family business work, is that it seems to me like a lot of it is relevant for larger businesses only. I think mine is definitely relevant for both. But 65% of all businesses in the world are micro family businesses, like with 6 or fewer employees. And I don't know what they have to help them achieve these goals. So, part of what I want is to be able to, and they're obviously critically important to families, to communities. So this is part of what I want to do, is to be able to give a tool that those businesses can use, as well as the larger ones.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So this, and I don't know if this comes up with students sometimes, if they ever approach you and say, do I join the family business or do I take a different path? Do you ever get those types of into those conversations? Do those ever show up at
Yes.
your door, if you will? And how do you help a young person through that decision making?
Yeah. So the way that I help them think it through is, they need to they need to really do a few steps. So one is they really need to kind of understand themselves, and that's hard. Like, I mean, this is what my course is about. This is part of what the Healthy Family, Healthy Business Method is about. Is this process of understanding yourself, what you care about, what you value, what you're willing to stand for, what motivates you, so that you kind of have to know yourself, because how can you
Mm,
make that decision if you don't have that piece. And then also to really understand what your family has, and sometimes that's hard too, right? Because a lot of times, families have great conversations, just not about anything particularly important, I guess I would say. Like, my family's like this, right? Like, what'd you do today? Nothing. "Oh, okay, what'd you do today? Nothing." It's like, I saw my friend, which is, I'm not saying that's bad, but it's
yeah.
just like these kind of more in-depth, sometimes it's just hard, these more in-depth conversations. So, people need kind of a process to be able to learn about what their family has. And then, to what I advise students is, like, it's not A or B. It's not, do I join the family business or do I not join the family business? Ask yourself a different question. Ask yourself a question. Ask yourself the question, how can I leverage off of, build on my family's assets? Again, the broader assets, not just a business or financial assets, but relationships, knowledge, values. How can I build on that to
Mm,
create value? And when you start with that as the question, then you can begin to explore. And the reason why I focus students on thinking about it that way is that the research shows that startups that are built on or connected to an existing family business are more successful than startups that are not. And it makes sense why, right? It makes perfect sense. Um, so you have something that you can build on. So just start with that. Sometimes I find that students, like, I had an example of a student in my class last year whose family business is like a chemical, manufacturing specialty chemicals. And her father's a very, very technical person, which makes good sense for running that business. She's quite artistic, interested in, very creative. I would say maybe more than artistic, creative person. Want to do something in a kind of creative field. So she had assumed she'd never want to work in her family business, which again is fine. Like, my mission is not to get people into the family business. It's to help them leverage what they have to do what they want to do.
mhm.
But anyway, but through my class, she had these a lot over the course of the semester. Every week, the students have a guided conversation with their parents, right? So they have a lot of in-depth conversation. So over the semester, they had these guided conversations of exploring the business and exploring her and all these things. And where they ended up was, like, this business doesn't have, like, any particularly effective marketing. Um, and there are ways that we should have a social media, but we don't have that at all. And so she and her father talked about it, and they decided that she would create that for the business. Will she do that for the rest of her career? Who knows? But
Mhm.
in that particular case, it wasn't like he created a job for her because he wanted her to. That wasn't what happened. He realized he had a need and that it was something that she was interested in filling. She realized that this was a great opportunity for her to take a leadership role at a young age. Um, And they only got there because it wasn't a question about, are you going to succeed me or not?
Hmm. Wow. So when you talk to young people now and you look at where we are in the world, right, and what's going on in our world today, and these are the emerging next gen leaders, if you will, what do you think is an important leadership trait that they have to possess to be effective and to successfully, make that transition into leadership in the here and now, Lauri?
I think so. And first of all, part of my healthy family, healthy business method is there's five core, I call them self-responsible leadership qualities.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just mention one of them because for the benefit of time. But so and one important one, I think they're all important, but one important one for sure is open curiosity. And I find like in my class, when I talk about this, my students, I sometimes can see in their eyes, like, wait, didn't we learn about this like in kindergarten? Like, what are we talking about here? um, but the truth is that, we use a lot of shortcuts and rules just to navigate our way through our days. And, which makes sense. It's efficient, et cetera. And not that in and of itself is fine. But we also need to be aware of when we need to be looking to learn something new. And so, like, in my case, I learned something new from the accounts receivable clerk. I could have made a lot of assumptions about what I knew, and
Mm-hmm.
and I could have asked questions that were more about telling her or proving to her what I knew than about like just genuinely wanting to know what was going on with her.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually, I find, takes more practice than people would think to learn to ask just genuine, open questions that actually don't have an agenda, that are not, something that has a lilt at the end of the sentence, but is actually trying to prove a point, and just to see what you can learn. I think it's hugely valuable. Um, and it gives you this, giant resource of knowledge that you can then deploy.
Mm-hmm. And that certainly is playing well in the hand of what we're in now, this age of AI, where
Yes.
it's not about as much how much expertise and knowledge you have. It's about how good are you at asking big questions. And the
Hmm.
bigger the question, you know, that's really the measure of, I think, the emerging leaders' intelligence and capacity and a willingness to learn and stay curious, right? And I think that's a great
Yes.
takeaway. Some of the best leaders that I know, they never stop being curious. Even past their retirement, they're still learning and doing and exploring and trying new things. And
Yes.
I think that makes for a very fulfilling life all the way, right? That's a
Absolutely.
big part of what you're talking about, really, is it's not just about the business, it's not just about the family, it's about, what you want and how you can empower yourself to be a creator of value, whether it's through the conduit of the family business or something diversified and totally new, for sure. So you've done the CEO role yourself. You've helped other businesses with transformation. You've extensively engaged in academia. Along the journey, Lauri, has anything in your mind fundamentally shifted where it's like, hey, I thought I knew this, but now I see a different way forward? Anything that's kind of changed your mind or reshifted your perspective as you've gone forward?
I think that what I used to think was that I needed to intervene to solve other people's problems. Like when I saw my husband struggling with his family, I thought it
Mm-hmm.
was my job to intervene and solve and try and solve that problem. What I've realized is that people are really capable, and my role is more to ask good questions, to be a good listener, to contribute to them being able to solve their own problems. So that's it's. I think I have developed a deep, not just appreciation, but just fascination and curiosity with the capacity with what people are thinking and what they're just, it's just um, it's amazing. So I guess it's, I've another way to put that would be I've maybe realized that of course I have an important role, but it's not all about me.
Mm, for sure, for sure. It's really, yeah, about empowering others and, being curious, but with no judgment, with no agenda, but purely to understand them and where they're coming from and maybe take them to a better place. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you look ahead, what's something that's really exciting you about the future of family entrepreneurship right now?
So, I mean, frankly, I'm super excited about my healthy family, healthy business method because it remains something that doesn't exist. And I've gotten very positive feedback from, families with businesses of all sizes. So I am super excited about getting my book written, about creating this, platform, tools, resources, etc. that, that I hope are going to, um, again, allow families to be able to create value together, whatever kind of value, and there are different kinds of value, right? Personal satisfaction is creating value, family relationships creating value. Of course, within a business or a startup or something else, creating value.
Mm,
But I'm hoping that in some small way to, again, family businesses, they create 70% of global GDP. So if I can make a small difference that is good for communities, good for families, it doesn't have to be much difference, right? It's like it's
yeah,
something small is actually a potential big impact.
absolutely. And then on the flip side, so certainly in your experience, your family's business exited to private equity and from a position of strength, of substantial growth leading up to that. Not always the case. A lot of times you see family businesses that are selling or exiting under duress. So when you
Yes.
look out to the future, what are some things that concern you about the state of family business, the state of family entrepreneurship right now?
So I think a few concerns. So one is that, obviously AI is creating a time of rapid change. And research shows that family businesses tend to do relatively better in times of stability. And that's, we touched earlier about this idea of, families often their values, they want to protect employees, customers, suppliers, those relationships matter. That's part of it. Also, a family business is often, a very large part of the family's wealth. So it's not like we're invested in, the stock market, or maybe they are too, but it's not, it's sort of, it's
Mhm.
a very concentrated asset.
Sure.
So that tends to be more conducive to incremental change, rather than rapid change that can feel risky. So I think that is, potentially a big challenge for family businesses if they fall behind with using AI, because it's really, I think, about it's a great way to improve an existing business, right? And so the
Mhm.
businesses that do use it are going to be improving their processes, et cetera. On the other hand, I think that family businesses, kind of have a superpower, so they can really um, excel even more in the world of AI than relatively, than in the past, because of this connection to the younger generation.
Mhm.
So, when this blending of the older generation's knowledge, again, company, industry, relation, all this kind of stuff, with the younger generation's technical fluency, digital literacy, AI natives, all that stuff, and the vision of the future, that's powerful. And a lot of companies don't have that kind of in the same way. One of the families that I work with a few years ago explained to me that his 13-year-old was in charge of social media, which is like a little bit of a joke, but it's, 500 million revenue company. It was not like but you know why? Because that 13-year-old had a much better sense of how to leverage social media and marketing, in some ways than he did. Um, so, that kind of example, like it's not just about when they're 30 and they're stepping up into a leadership role, it's when they're 16, you know, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
to learn from them, kind of similar to what we were talking about before, like who can you learn from? Kind of everybody. So I think, that is a superpower. So I think that, some of the risks are, um, kind of other side of our kind of technological shift, like kind of age of social media, sort of this idea of, okay, we're together but separate, which is this great professor at MIT, Sherry Turkle, is, kind of coined that concept. But we're sitting at the dinner table, we all have our phones, so the connectivity is perhaps less, than it might have been in the past. So it's harder to get to what I was just talking about before. So that's kind of that's what I'm seeing as both the opportunity and the concern.
Great point. Well, gosh, Lauri, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, if not days. But last question before we start to wrap up. If any of our listeners wanted to learn more about you, connect with you, learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, so the best way for now is on my LinkedIn. You can obviously find me, my name, Lauri Union, and I do weekly posts. So I'm actually just starting now a weekly post about healthy family, healthy business method, and but I do other posts about different things that I'm doing and working on. So I'm going to be starting a newsletter in September. So my LinkedIn will be a way to learn more about that.
Awesome. We'll definitely flag that in the show notes. So to wrap up, Lauri, what really stands out in your perspective is that successful family businesses are certainly not built by accident. They're built very much intentionally through leadership, learning, a high degree of trust, curiosity, and a shared commitment to creating value together, hopefully value across generations. And again, it's all about creating value and stepping away from the family business itself and saying, how is this a value creating asset, or what could it be? I think maybe that's why your work probably resonates with so many entrepreneurial families. It's a recognition that long-term success isn't simply about building a stronger business. It's about building a stronger family, stronger relationships, and ones that are capable of really taking that journey together in the healthiest possible way. So, Lauri, thank you so much for sharing your story, your research, your perspectives. Again, we've been speaking with Dr. Lauri Union, adjunct lecturer at Babson College, and the creator of Healthy Business, Healthy, say it for me again.
Healthy family, healthy business.
Healthy family, healthy business. Thank you. And I'm your host, Ed Delia, and this has been another episode of Growing Up B2B. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Lauri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Fabulous conversation. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.